everybody, welcome back to my channel. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to hand sew a fabric lining to the inside of a crocheted bag with a base or with boxed corners. You do not need a sewing machine for this tutorial. You can completely hand sew it. So the materials that you will need for this tutorial is cotton fabric. You really could just use a yard of fabric, I would say is safe. And then you'll need scissors, a ruler, sewing pins, a sewing needle and thread, and a pencil. To start, you'll fold your fabric in half and then line your bag up with the bottom fold of the fabric and just lay the bag out completely flat and just press out any of the sides. Next up, you'll want to measure a 1/2 inch seam allowance on both sides and on the top of the bag because the bottom of the bag is lined up with the fold of the fabric. So just on the sides, you'll mark a 1/2 inch out from the side, and then you can trace that line down from the top of the bag to the bottom all the way straight down. So straight down from the top to the bottom, and then I'm marking where my 1/2 inch is from the top, and then just making a line going straight across. Next, just take your scissors and you'll cut all the way around the line that you traced, and then the 1/2 inch seam allowance on that right side of the bag. I didn't bother tracing a line because I just lined up the bag a 1/2 inch in from that outer seam. Now I'm going to take the sewing pins and just pin up both sides of the bag, and you want to insert the pin at where the bag is going to start. So basically a 1/2 inch in, because that's where you're going to be sewing up. So I'm just measuring that, making sure it really lines up with the outer edge of the bag, and I'm going to pin all the way up the right side and the left side of the bag. Now that both sides are pinned, we can start to sew. So I take a really long piece of sewing thread and then cut that, and I'm going to thread it through my needle. Now this is literally the way that I learned to sew, tie a knot when sewing in home ec in middle school. So you just take both strands of the thread and wrap it around your pointer finger and thumb a few times, and then just basically make a knot with it by, I don't know what you would call this, by kind of rolling it in a ball and then just pulling it. So like rolling the ball, pulling it, rolling the ball, pulling it, and eventually you have a nice knot. I don't know if that's really technical, but I learned it in middle school and it's worked. So now I'm going to insert at the very base, right below that first pin, and just insert the hook in the needle in the same spot over and over again. So just from the back to the front and then the front to the back, just to really secure that first stitch in place. So now I'm going to start sewing up the side. So I pull out that first pin and then insert the needle to the back and then bring it back through the front and then just pull it through. You want to really try to evenly space out all your stitches and not make them too big, because then you'll have gaps in your work. Once you finish sewing, you'll see that there are gaps. So you want to make the stitches as close together as possible, kind of like as if you were doing it on a sewing machine. They'd be even smaller stitches than what I'm making here. Another way that you could do this is just inserting the needle and pulling it through the back, and then moving it from the back to the front and just doing it like that. I think I like the other way better, only because I do think you can make your stitches a little bit more even and correctly spaced out. So once I finish going all the way up the one side and now I'm at the top end, I'm going to basically finish the way I started by going in and out through the same spot a few times just to really secure it, and then make a knot by kind of inserting to the back to the front, making a loop, and then going through that loop about 2 or 3 times and pulling it tight. And I'll probably do that again just to make that a little bit better of a knot. Yep, and then go once, twice through that loop and then pull it tight and then just cut. So now I'll just look at my work from the side. So I probably could have made them a little closer together, but you could see if you don't make your stitches close together, you'll have little gaps in your work there. So now I'm going to do the same exact thing going up the other side. I'll show you another little close-up look of how I make that knot. So I take both ends and then I loop it 3 times around my fingers, and then I just kind of squish it together and roll it together to make a knot, and then just pull, roll it together and pull. And it works every time. So now that both sides are sewn up, we're going to work on making that boxed shape on the bottom. So what you'll need to do is take your bag and measure what the bottom of the bag measurements are. So the width of the bottom is going to be 2 inches, and then I'll measure the length of the bag, which is about 9 inches or 9.5, it's looking like. So now we'll go back to the fabric, and I'm going to run my hand down to that bottom corner and then just try to flatten that corner out as evenly as possible. So once I have that triangle shape, I'm going to measure that 2 inches that I found before and just make sure that length there is 2 inches. And then I'm going to pencil in that line right where the ruler is so I can see where that 2-inch mark is. Then I'll take my sewing pins and then just pin that right along that line, because that's where I'm going to sew next. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Just find that corner, lay it flat, get your ruler, and measure 2 inches where it lays flat from 2 inches from one side to the other side. And then just take your pencil and just trace that line, and that's where you will line your sewing pins up next. So now that I have the sewing pins set on both sides, I'm going to take my ruler and just make sure that from where the pins are inserted on both sides will measure out to be 9.5 inches, which is what I said was the length of the base of the bag. So right there you can see that it's 9.5 inches, so I'm all set and ready to sew along those 2 lines. So with the same exact method as before, you'll make your knot and then just make the same type of running stitch going up the 2 sides of the bag where the pins are. All right, so now that we've made that boxed a butt base, we'll take the top and just fold it in that 1/2 inch, and then you'll take this and insert it into your bag just as is. Once the lining is fully inserted, you'll line up the side edge with the very side of the bag and then just place a sewing pin on the side to set that in place. Then you'll do the same thing on the other side. So first just making sure that the sides are totally lined up and pin them into place. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the top and the front and the back of the bag as well, just pinning that as well. And so now that all of the pins are in place, we are ready to start sewing. So I'm going to start at the side of the bag, and the same thing, you create your knot, and I'm going to go in between the bag and the fabric to just pull that knot in there so it's not seen, and just tuck it in. So now what you're going to be doing is just making one stitch in that same spot again, just to make that first stitch really secure, and you won't be able to see the thread through the front of the bag. But now as you start to sew, you want to insert your needle where you're not really inserting it through the whole bag, you're just kind of grabbing some of the yarn with the fabric, so that way it is attached, but you're not seeing the sewing thread from the outside of the bag. So it's like an invisible stitch. And you want to have your stitches be as close to the top of the fabric as you possibly can get it, so then there's no gaps or bagging of the fabric. So once you sew all the way around, evenly around the whole bag, you'll make that a stitch going in and out of all the way through the bag and the fabric a bunch of times, just to really make it secure. And then you'll make a knot the same way, so just pulling it through the fabric, making a loop, and then inserting the needle through the loop once and twice, and then just pulling it tight. And you can do that a few times just to make it, again, really secure. After that last knot, you can just pull the needle all the way through and then cut the thread from the outside of the bag, just really close to the bag. And then there you have it. So now you have a nice hand sewn fabric lining on the inside of your bag, adding that little boxed edge, which is perfect for bags that have that kind of box shape and aren't just flat all the way on the bottom. I probably made this a little too baggy, so I could definitely work on like my seam allowance. I'm definitely not a professional sewer by any means, but it just kind of goes to show you that it's not that scary, especially if you don't have a sewing machine. You can add a fabric lining with no sewing experience, and it does come out really nice and just holds the integrity of the bag so much better. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and let me know what you think if you have any questions in the comments.